Welcome to the 2021 pesticide training for safety. I appreciate Stay Green having me. My name is Tim Fernald. I'm with Fernald Education Services. We are doing this training class in English and Spanish. I'll be doing the portion in English. Jaime Boyana from Ewing Irrigation and Ewing Education Department will be speaking the second half in Spanish. This is a collaborative effort to provide education regarding pesticide safety for 2021. My name is Tim L. Fernald. I am with Fernald Education Services. I am a pesticide control advisor for the state of California. I pretty much hung my hat in California for over 50 years. This is my contact services. Please take note and feel free to contact me at any point in time. So the next couple hours, we're going to discuss pesticide safety training for 2021 regarding the safe use of pesticides to the end users. This is the training form that you should have in front of you or have access to. If not, please see your supervisor. We're going to go over pretty much everything that's on this page and then some. This is a training form that I've been using for a while. There'll be some new forms coming out next year, but we're going to discuss training for all pesticides, not just one pesticide specifically. So as you see here, the annual training, please put an X next to that in the yellow column here, and our initials right below mine. Up here in the top left-hand corner, put the employee's name and the employee's signature. Make sure you sign it. And along with the employer of Stay Green. If your job consists of a mixer, loader, flagger, etc., please check the box next to it. These records are kept on file for 2 years. So maintain the records for all employees that are taking this course in English and Spanish for 2 years. This is the Spanish version, which Jaime will be going over during his presentation. So let's get started. We're talking about pesticides in general. This is kind of where we used to be and where we are today. Back in the day, we've had chemicals, DDT, arsenates, you name it, it's pretty strong chemicals, and how they were packaged in metal containers and glass jars. Quite a few changes over the years. Just some more pictures of what we have seen in the past. And there wasn't a whole lot of concern regarding pesticide safety. There were some rules in place, but not a whole lot. You can buy this stuff at a local feed store or farm supply store and go out and spray with not a whole lot of restrictions. Here's a few pictures of the way it used to be back on the farm. I'm sure there was no concern regarding personal protective equipment during here. He's spraying the trees. There was no concern for calibration. And again, no personal equipment for safety involved here. This date backs quite a few years ago. That brings us to where we are now with pesticides in general. A lot has changed over the years for sure. This is my 31st year in the business, and I've seen many changes, especially as a advisor. The biggest change I've seen now is more regulatory affairs, not just in California, but all nationwide. We do seem to see having a safer pesticides being produced, safer chemistry. We do have better equipment for applying our pesticides correctly. Better application techniques, the things that the applicator can do to make sure the pesticide is applied correctly. Better personal protective equipment and more frequent use of PPE. Well, besides COVID, of course, PPE is the biggest thing that pesticide applicators can definitely follow and use correctly. And of course, education. Like I said, this is a collaborative training class with Ewing and myself to bring you the updated information regarding pesticide safety. Beyond this class, make sure you stay updated with any further education regarding any pesticide that is being used by State Green, and keep yourself updated. These are just some photos of where we are today in everyday usage out in the industry regarding agricultural pumps and equipment and golf course, etc. The reason why these pictures are being shown is to show that the applicator must be aware of the equipment that's being used for the application. It's very important that he has a full understanding of how to operate the complete logistics regarding the operations of that sprayer to make sure things are done correctly and the chemical is applied correctly. This is a picture of a golf course spray boom. This applicator is very aware of what takes place in the tank. Probably every nozzle, the output of every nozzle, the speed of how he's being broadcast. He's making sure that things are done correctly for the end result to make sure that the spray does not damage these greens and make sure that his pest is taken care of. That's the ultimate goal. This picture here shows the do's and don'ts regarding pesticide application in a sense. So he's wearing his personal protective equipment, his goggles. You have gloves on. He's wearing Tyvek coveralls. He's dumping a chemical inside the spray unit. This is all correct, but he has a no air gap here. He has the hose, which is probably going to a drinking fountain or someplace over there, inside the tank. That's definitely things not to do. So this picture shows partially correct, partially incorrect. So it's very important that you don't do this part of it. Excuse me. So the regulation for pesticide safety, pesticide enforcement, and where does it start? It starts with the federal government. EPA has a branch called FIFRA. From there, it trickles down to state by state. In California, it's by the Department of Agricultural, California Department of Pesticide Regulations up in Sacramento. From there, they collaborate with every county in the state of California and every ag commissioner. It could be Kern County, it could be San Diego County. That's where things preside. It's very important that you stay in contact with either DPR in Sacramento or contact your local county to find local updates as far as local regulations for what's being sprayed. The inspectors come from the county ag department. They're the ones that will be inspecting this training class. They're the ones that will be inspecting your usage and so forth. So that's kind of how the order of regulation works on a day-to-day basis. These next slides are just pictures of, people in the public eye. We have a big park setting. We have soccer fields. We have kids playing. And what the reason behind those pictures is that when you spray pesticides, everyone's watching. Someone's watching out there with a camera phone. So it's very important that you follow, training courses like this one here. Make sure you understand the pesticide labels and follow the instructions. That's the whole meaning behind this course. The definition of a pesticide, what is it? There's so many of them out there. You can see here in the picture. The biggest thing is that came down from EPA, the FIFRA. It's a substance, a mixture of substances intended to prevent, destroy, repel, basically any pest that's out there. That's how I declared the life of a pest. So you put the pest in front of the word side, and that's how it's determined what it is. It's a mixture used to control, suppress, defoliate that pest. So the word side means kill or killer or control, and then that's at the ending of the pest itself. So, for example, we have categories. We have weeds, which are classified as herbicides. If you have a disease, that is a fungicide, and so forth. And we'll get more on that as we move forward with the presentation. As an example, again, you have an insect with a size. This is a insecticide, and that's kind of one example how we define what a pesticide is. From there, they go into categories of what they are. Ranger Pro, for example, you guys use Roundup Pro Max. This is the generic Roundup Pro. Sledgehammer. So those are categories for herbicides. So we look at those pest control products, maybe a growth regulator, maybe a herbicide, fungicide, insecticide, and so forth. And usually the category is listed on the outside of the container. So it helps you know what pest that you're trying to go after with the correct pesticide. Types of pesticides that we have out there. The left-hand column and the right-hand column are just a few of the pesticides that we see on a daily basis and are used nationwide in the turf and ornamental setting, as well as the ag setting. So there's a whole list of here. It's important to the applicator, anybody that comes in contact or wants to use these type of pesticides, know what pest that they are trying to control with these pesticides. And here's an example of kind of how it works. So on the top left here is called a caricide. And what is a target pest? We'll take a few minutes and guess at that, but if you guess mites or ticks, you are correct. Algicide for aquatics, of course, algae. Avicide is for birds and so on here. You can see here bactericide, caticide is for cats. No, that's not correct. Don't use for cats. It's a joke. Fungicide, herbicides, and so forth. You can kind of see how things work here. Next page, muscicides is for snails, pesticides for fish, and so on. So make sure you choose the right one out there. Spousicide, if you're married, that's a good one too. Don't use that one. Okay, so these are your chemicals on the landscape maintenance side list at Stay Green. Use Roundup Pro Max, Quick Pro. Those are post-emergent herbicides. Speed Zone Green Label, Speed Zone Southern, which is basically another herbicide. Freehand, pre-emergent for beds, ornamental beds, Snapshot, ornamental beds. Dimension, turf grass and beds. Deadline, snails and slugs. And of course, gopher bait. All these, the biggest thing is that you look at the center words, what's on them. I think all these are pretty much caution. They dictate how toxic they are. So I'm gonna put these in grouping. So these are all pretty much herbicides, post-emergent herbicides, and some pre-emergent herbicides. As far as the safety, it's very important that you take each one of these labels and read it from head to toe to make sure you understand everything regarding that label. These are all very similar layouts as far as the safety, as far as PPE, etc. They all require the same goggles, the same mixing and loading. The biggest change you may see here is mixing and loading will be Speed Zone Green down the road. Or briefly, they may get into an apron wearing with mixing and loading. That's the biggest change, but we'll talk about that later. But all these are kind of grouped into one grouping as far as herbicides. And rodenticides is a little bit different. More usages where you can and cannot use those things, so be aware of that. But with every label, make sure you read it thoroughly and follow each one of those products. This product list should be attached to the sign-in sheet that you start with this class with to show the list that you've discussed these as a group. Next one, those guys who spray on the Stay Green specialty pesticide list, a little bit bigger list, longer list. You have Atramec, which is a plant growth regulator. Speed Zone Red, which is actually a product that is restricted in California because of the percentage of 2,4-D. So this is restricted use. Anything over a quart, it requires an RUP from the county ag department because of the percentage of 2,4-D that's in here. Marin and imidacloprid, that's the herbicide. So what you do here is put your things into groupings as far as the categories. Everything else here is pretty self-explanatory. Sledgehammers for sedges, reward is dicot, surfland is a rhizoline, pre-emergence, post-emergent for broadleaf weeds. You have an organic here and so forth. The biggest red flag here that I see is fumitoxin. Fumitoxin is a danger label, skull and crossbones, poison. This is pretty bad stuff as a whole. Be very, very cautious. It requires a different level of PPE when you apply it, mix it. You don't only mix it, but you how to use it with the tablets. Take extra precaution and follow all precautions on this. Not a whole lot of room for air for this. If you not cautious enough, this will put you 6 feet under. No joke there. So be very cautious with this. And this requires a permit from every county that you buy it from and every person that you buy it from. Yeah, it requires a permit. So pretty bad stuff there. But take this list as well, along with this previous list on this page, and combine that together and put that onto, attach that to your sign-in sheets of the products being used. But most of all your herbicides here have the same type of PPE, first aid, etc. Again, fumitoxin is the one that sticks out as your worst one out of both pages here. So be extra cautious. This is an example of the Roundup Pro Max label. All your chemicals in your previous list will be a very similar layout to this. A few changes with the SDS sheets and labels, but you're going to see the center words. You're going to see the sections of ingredients, precautionary statements on every label, environmental hazards, and so forth. This is about 9 pages long. Make sure you follow, look at all 9 pages thoroughly through the Pro Max. And this is the SDS sheet. I don't know if you guys noticed here, but that the SDS sheet has a pictogram on it now. That's the new layout for OSHA, and I'll talk more of that in depth during the presentation, but you're gonna start seeing more of those pictograms on labels as well as SDS sheets. So pesticide safety and labels, that's why we're talking about here today. That's the backbone of pesticide safety itself for the end user. So control practices, what are you doing as an applicator to make things safe for yourself? Pesticide safety and rules and regulations. What parts of the label are we have to look at? Pretty much everything. And always read the label. The goal is, as an applicator, is to reduce pesticide exposure. That is our ultimate goal when applying pesticides, no matter where you're at. And by doing that, we have to apply it correctly. It's easier said than done. That's why we look at the techniques of how we apply, calibration, usages, the sites, kind of all the above. And why do we have to do that? Errors happen out there. We all make mistakes when applying pesticides. But like I said earlier, everyone is watching you, or someone's watching you when you put that backpack on in the middle of a park, or you're wearing a Tyvek suit. Someone is watching you spray. And all it takes is one error for someone to call in and complain. So we're going to follow the rules. This is from the state of California. This is a copy of the N series. And you can print this through DPR website page in California. It's 35 pages long, and basically we're covering all this in a nutshell in this presentation, but it talks about non-agricultural usages regarding pesticide safety, what the N series stands for. This is a poster from DPR and the N series. It is in English and Spanish. A copy of this should be printed out and posted into where your documents at, where all your employees have access to this and can visually see it next to your pesticides. Have it stored next to your labels and SDS sheets in every single site. This is the DPR's webpage. That you can get that previous poster that I showed you and a copy of the N series. If you need questions regarding that, get a hold of myself or Jaime or Tony Lopez with Ewing, and we'll be glad to take care of you. There's a web page where you can find the laws and regulations regarding the N series. So this is the backbone of it, worker protection and safety. The biggest thing that we have to look for when it comes to pesticide safety this year, more so than ever, I think, is the hazard communications. Making sure the end user, the applicator, has full idea what's going on. What are the risk factors involved? The risk factor, you start looking at the toxicity and the exposure. So having a meeting or communication between the employee and the employer is crucial. Make sure there's a plan in place for every pesticide application. It's good to keep in touch with the, of course, the manufacturer or the dealer. The dealer would be Ewing Irrigation. From there, they can contact the manufacturer if any further questions, agronomically speaking, with that, or get a hold of an advisor like myself to help with recommendations. If need be, the federal EPA to the state is communication, and then of course the county. Myself, PCA advisor, I work hand in hand with the county regularly basis, so we know what's kind of up to date, what's kind of taking place, what are you looking for during inspections, and so forth. But the biggest thing is that we stay communicated with their applicators to the pesticides and to reduce our risk and usage. Every applicator has the rights to know what's out there as far as health information. This should be information should be documented into the company's file as far as illnesses related to heat exhaustion, for example. Make sure that the applicator knows where the location is of these safety data sheets, labels, PSIS, which means these safety series, the N series. All these three documents should be in a book or a binder next to that poster, and make sure they are aware where to find it. Employees does have rights when they spray. Make sure this goes in hand with the company policy about spraying. Know how to decontaminate in case of an accident or safety procedures. And we're going to discuss more about poisoning symptoms and signs, and of course, routes of entry into our body. So these are the top health information that should be provided to your employees, anybody who handles a pesticide. We will discuss the word cancer, of course, long-term or short-term hazards out there. Every chemical is not a cancer-causing agent. There's definitely some precautionary principles that we all take when using pesticides, but we will discuss that further in the presentation. Here's a copy of an example of the documents in a booklet. Again, have it labels, the SDS sheet, the N series, training records, and what other further education material that you may use regarding your product. Maybe there's a additional addendum sheet on speed zone. Definitely toss it in there. Anything that's useful as far as documents and safety and usage regarding any pesticide is warranted. This poster's been out since 2013. You can go to OSHA or ghs.gov and find it. This should be up to next to that poster from the N series as well. This is the Global Harmonization System, GHS, was put out by our government and OSHA. This is the change for having everybody have the same communication regarding chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, oils, paints, etc. There are 9 pictograms into the system here. About 4 of these reach the pesticide and fertilizer world as a whole. Great poster to have up. And there's the definitions on what these pictograms mean. On a label, you'll see them, but you won't see the definition below that. So you'll see the pictogram and that's it. This is a put out between OSHA and EPA is gradually approving these as they move forward. There's still some controversy on the communication, and I'll show you that what's kind of going on. But the biggest thing is that they are here to stay. They're broken into 3 different categories: health hazards, physical hazards, and environmental hazards. Amongst the 9 pictograms, it's very important that you kind of look at these as on the SDS sheet and use those as guidelines for your safety. Chemical classifications. Chemicals will be classified using the GHS systems for standard languages. That's why they built that. And there's the 3 categories we just talked about. From there, you start looking at overall signal words. Now, on the SDS sheet, you'll see here, I have danger, I have warning, but there is no caution. In our industry, we have EPA came out with 3 signal words: caution, warning, danger. OSHA has now changed it. They no longer have caution on the SDS sheets. The labels will still have the word caution. It makes it confusing for the end user, but that's what I guess the beef you could say between OSHA and EPA are having. So We're trying to work this out together. But currently, it's the word where it's at. Not all labels will have a set of words, so be aware of that. This is an example of Ranger Pro, Roundup Pro Max, same thing. So this is the caution set of word that is on currently on the Ranger Pro. Caution set of word. This is the label, front cover. This is a copy of the SDS sheet. Okay, you see here it has a warning set of word and has a pictogram. Well, we have to follow the law. Label is the law. We may have heard that once or time before. This is just a guideline for safety from OSHA. We have to follow the rules here, yes. But when it comes to the acute toxicity regarding the label, we look at the word caution. That's how we know how toxic the chemical is. This is toxic, but we look at the caution precautionaries regarding the pictograms on the SDS only. Okay, so follow the label, not just the SDS sheet. Labels of law. Here's an example of dimension 270G, pre-emergent. The chemical is dithiopyr. Years ago, it was a caution. It still is a caution. The pictogram shows it as a warning. This is the current label on it as we speak today. The label says it's still a caution. So again, labels of law. We follow the SDS sheets for guidelines, and label. Everything else will be that under the law there. So again, the pictograms represent the acute toxicity, what they're looking at, as far as severe skull and crossbones. Acute toxicity with the exclamation point would be less toxicity. You'll find this on a lot of our labels and SDS sheets is the exclamation point. This is the overall health hazard pictograms category. If you see the bottom right hands here, the star inside the carcinogenic around the lung area, that means the chemical may have some cancer causing agents. So be aware of that. You may find this on a lot of chemicals. You probably won't find this on Roundup. So a little FYI there. A little deeper in here, we start physical hazards. If you see fertilizers that has this bomb picture on it, I probably wouldn't use it, LOL. But this is more for fire departments and safety cleanup. If you have an accident down the road, again, this is for oxidizers and stuff. Again, these are not just designed for pesticides. They're designed for paints and thinners and WD-40, you name it. This is where kind of things are going as far as a global harmonization for communication for products. The overall procedure for safety you start looking at for pesticides. Create your own procedures. This is the one you need to kind of follow, but make sure you maybe create one with company policy. Exercise caution at all times when using a pesticide. Number two, read and understand the product labels. You'll hear me say read a label about 80 times tonight, but definitely read that label. Practice good personal hygiene. Wash up constantly prior to usage as well as after usage. Wear PPE. Biggest violation in California is PPE, so make sure you wear PPE and take care and maintain the equipment. Operation, make sure the tips are working correctly, pumps, pressure, you name it. So here's kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-step procedures that you could do to make sure you do it safely. Create your own if you want to. This is ones that I like to have, but a good one to follow. The definition of a handler. What does it mean? Anybody who comes in contact with a pesticide, who mixes, who loads the pesticide, who applies the pesticide, is around the equipment or even uses the product, and also comes in contact with the containers. These are all considered to be handling or handlers, and it's why they are taking this pesticide training course. So where does it all start? It starts with knowing the product that either an applicator, myself, or Ewing or Target sells to you, and then the applicator. Once you buy that product, you are ultimately responsible for all the laws and regulations regarding the usage of that pesticide. That's kind of where it all starts. So a lot of weight on the applicator, not a whole lot of margin for error when you spray pesticides. But common sense plays a big role. But regulatory affairs is right in your back pocket as well. Again, read the label. Purchasing, mixing, and storing disposal. There's a long list behind you, but I can't stress enough how important it is to take a few minutes and read the label. And how many types of pesticides that are out there? There's a lot. Your list that you provided me from Stay Grain, that's a lot, and they all come in different shapes and forms and granulars to liquids to you name it. It's out there, but they all have their purposes. They all have their different similarities in the label. Make sure you understand how they all work and the safety precautions regarding each one of those. The biggest thing when you buy chemicals, you start looking, shopping around, look for the least harmful product. Those are your caution words. You make a right hand turn here and go over here to the, really dangerous. That's the fumotoxins and the danger signal words. Your best to stay away from those. Those kind of, you're just asking for problems when using those, higher risk factor and so forth. So there's no reason why we can't shop down here and have your chemicals into the caution signal words. Do your best to kind of create a checklist on your sites in all your counties that you guys work in. Responsibility. And the biggest thing is, of course, choose the correct product. Number two, choose the correct site. It's very important that the product matches up to the site that you're spraying, whether it be a turf grass area, an ornamental bed area, right of ways, fence lines, you name it. Make sure the site matches up. Number three, of course, once you have 1 and 2 covered, read the label to confirm everything on there. Read the SDS sheet and look at the application safety requirements with that and apply it correctly and do the right thing. That's the environmental stewardship behind it. Again, you're being watched. So the stewardship is apply it correctly and be cautious around yourself and your surroundings. When it comes to pesticide usage, we have categories. We have 4 categories. We have prevention, we have suppression, we have control, and we have eradication. The 2 most common ones we use, and according to your list that you have pesticides with, we have prevention and control. Some chemicals will suppress, depends on the application rate and timing. We very seldom do eradication unless it's very, very bad. Fumotoxin is got where that kind of goes, that kind of cleans house on everything that's there. But we do our best to prevent and control to keep things somewhat in check and somewhat safe for the end use. The label is a law, okay? It's also the regulation within the counties that you operate amongst the state as well. It is a requirement. It is not a suggestion. So it's important that we kind of follow that rule. So what are the components of the label itself? There's use information, and they're all categorized, spread out. It can be in segments, 9 pages long, 5 pages long. But they are broken up into categories as far as environmental, identifying the site, the pest, safety information, and so forth. So go through here and look at the parts. So why is it important to take a few minutes and read the label? If you've been spraying chemicals for years, and I get this all the time, I know how to mix it, I know how to spray it. Well, that's fine too, but as an advisor, I have so many labels memorized. I still do checks and balances and read the label. Accidents do happen because pesticides and herbicides are not the same. And it's amazing how errors can happen or miscommunication between the label and to the end user. Interpretation is a big thing. Number 1 violation in California is applicators not complying with the label, the labeling, or understanding how to follow PPE or mix rates or understanding the verbiage on the label. Here's an example of what not reading a label or bad communication between the end user and the person he brought it from or what have you. Not reading the label or understanding what's in the jug or the chemicals or how they work. Let's call them MOA, which means mode of action. He sprayed his entire lawn and killed it. And he missed some spots though. More pictures of what was sprayed and missed. He tried to create a mixture of a weed and feed on himself, but ended up killing everything in there. Didn't realize that glyphosate was a full-blown systemic. So yeah, Dimension and Promax mixed together, great combination, fantastic mixture, but the wrong application. I would not put these two on turf. You can't apply Dimension on turf by itself with no issues. As soon as you add Roundup to the mixture, you're going to have issues just like this. Again, applicator error, things happen, but very costly mistake here. Familiarity breeds contempt. Yes, the reason why this may happen when we get into a comfort zone and too relaxed and we don't review the label. Label directions are always changing, so take a few minutes and read the label. So the labeling is a very important document. We all know that. For pesticide safety to medical personnel, it could be an important source of treatment information in the case of poisoning. That's how we use that. If you get hurt, make sure the SDS and label are with you for sure. To the applicator, the product labeling is the basic backbone to our product safety. Make sure we use it and apply it properly. So parts of the label are broken down into the sections here. We have identifying, precautionary, too fast there. Identifying information, again, product name, ingredients, EPA numbers, and so forth. Under precautionary statements, we have our essential words, child hazard warnings, first aid, hazard to humans and domestic animals, and so forth. So what's on the label? We have the brand name, of course, name by which the product is advertised or sold by, Roundup, Promax, Dimension, etc. Chemical name identifies the chemical components under the active ingredients and structures of the herbicide. So up in the brand name, I had Roundup Promax. It's still glyphosate. I had Dimension up here, dithiopyr. So you can see here how the brand name and chemical names do match up. And you'll find that actually on the label source. Here's an example of how it's laid out. We have our trade name, of course. We have our signal word below that, and precaution and caution. We have our active ingredients, basically what's in the jug. As an applicator, it's very important that you know what that is, because a inspector may come up to you and ask you, what are you spraying? You better say glyphosate. You know, that's what he's asking you, and how much did you mix and so forth. And then, of course, the inner ingredients, that could be water as a carrier. But 4 common things that you should know, that's what's on the front cover of the label here. From there you go to different types of pesticides. This is a statement that you're going to find on the product, what it controls. For example, Turflawn ester, which is on your list, it controls annual and perennial broadleaf weeds and Bermuda grass inside ornamental turf. That's a complete description of what that chemical does. That's the mode of action of that chemical. The sedgehammer controls nest sedge in turf and ornamental areas, and so on. Propiconazole is a all-purpose fungicide. But there's an example of how pesticides and the statement indicates of what pests they're trying to knock out. And what I just showed you there, this is a picture of sedgehammer, and you can see the disclaimer right there on the front cover. So that kind of gets you started on how to choose your pesticides correctly to the pest you're trying to knock out. Ask yourself some questions when you start. How do you find out how toxic your pesticide product is? How do you know? How bad is it for me? How safe is it for me? The center word is the correct answer there. That tells you how the acute toxicity, how toxic that chemical is for me. Caution, warning, danger. Caution is very safe to use. The front cover, you're going to see under precautionary statements, our center words will begin to pop out. 3 categories and symbols: highly toxic, danger, poison, of course. warning, and of course, caution, category 1, 2, and 3 there. We shoot for number 3, caution. The definition of toxicity based upon those synonym words. Toxicity is the capacity of a substance to produce injury or death. It all depends on how much you're around. Chemicals like fumitoxin won't take very much compared to Roundup. So you got to be aware of the toxicities regarding that product. And after this presentation, you'll have a better insight of how to handle those. So the toxic testing is done by lab results. They do check the acute toxicity of our skin, oral, inhalation, and eyes, and that's how the synonym words are determined. Then from there, they're matched on there, danger warning. You can see the toxicity levels. That tells you actually depends on the product, would be insecticide or herbicide, depends on the product or the category. The approximate amount needed to kill the average person of, say, 150 pounds or greater. And depends, of course, how it's taken and so what have you, but be aware of what it's doing to you, Fumitoxins up here. Just the fumes alone will knock you out, so be careful. So in other words, caution, warning, danger must appear on the front panel of all products, organic or synthetic. They must be on the front page of every label. So we go down here, they do indicate acutely toxic the product is to humans. And every product will have this statement on it as well. Keep out of reach of children. That will appear on the front label. So in other words, potential hazard. The thing is, though, those caution, warning, dangers, in other words, is not based on just the active ingredient alone. Okay, you have the inert ingredients. That includes carriers, solvents, everything else under that ingredient statement. So the toxins are everything in the jug here. 100% of the ingredient statement is classified for the categories of caution, warning, and danger. In case the risk of the acute effects. Again, there's 4 routes of entry. And get those here in a few minutes here. In other words, do not indicate the risk or delayed effects or allergic effects, okay? Again, we have no idea what takes place down the road. You get sick 2 months later from a pesticide, that could be a delayed effect from it, but there's no way to know. There's no way how to determine what chronic illnesses we're going to have down the road. Everybody has allergies a little bit different, but in other words, represent only things that happen to us right now. And these are the categories that how it affects us: acute, chronic, and allergic. So, we focus on acute toxicity on a daily basis when spraying pesticides. The question is, does the chemical cause cancer? Very possible. That's the precautionary principle, the unknown risk when we spray pesticides. If the SDS sheet has a carcinogenic pictogram on it, I'm probably not going to use it. Or if I'm going to use it, I'm going to be very cautious before I spray. The quick definition of, the acute poisoning usually occurs within about anywhere from, 2 hours, 4 hours, up to 12 hours of exposure. That takes a lot of exposure to be around for acute poisoning. You can have a chemical backpack leak and get your back wet and have acute poisoning. So it varies, depends on the application and how it affects us and how it went into our bodies, determines how the exposure takes place. Again, this is chronic, usually from a small dosage over a long period of time. For example, if you are a mixer and loader and that's all you do around a heavy concentrated material, your risk factor may go up regarding chronic poisoning down the road. It's an example. Speaking of risk here, this is how we determine it. So the risk of pesticides depends on toxicity, which is your caution, warning, danger, synonym words, and the dosage. How much are you mixing to absorb into your bodies? And then how often are you applying it? So for example here, if I take Roundup Pro Max, the toxicity is caution, and the dosage is 2 ounces per gallon of water per 1,000 square feet, and I'm applying it once a week. Very low toxicity, okay? Very low toxicity. Now, if I take fumitoxin, for example, poison, danger, bad stuff, dosage is so many pellets per hole, you know, and if it gets wet, you're going to have the fumes. So caution is very high. Frequency could be one time, but the dosage and the toxicity and the environment dictates a higher risk factor. So you got to weigh things out. Just be cautious. So hazards increase when? What's this person doing? They are mixing and loading. So you have a higher concentration being poured into the tank, the direct active ingredient, very high single exposure. And after many exposures over time, your definitely risk will definitely go higher. From there, you start looking at poisoning, you know, the signs and symptoms of poisonings. Now, there's a couple of surveys I did a few years ago, but still pretty accurate. Let's just show you kind of how applicators are being affected. So 31% of applicators were surveyed have been mildly poisoned by a pesticide. And 69% of them said no, they have not. 26% said yes, they have mild symptoms, and so on. So you can see here, not too bad. And then the question came up again, are pesticides following the usage of PPE when spraying chemicals on a daily basis? Do you wear PPE? It's required by label. 47% of them said no, they're not. That's a red flag. Almost 50% of the people are not wearing PPE when applying pesticides. The reason is they're in the comfort zone. It's just Roundup. It's just this. It's just 1 second. It's just a backpack sprayer full. It won't happen to me. Well, that's the biggest one of violations that we're seeing in California. And you can see here the numbers are increasing. Okay. So the story here is definitely where pesticide protective equipment here, PPE, to minimize poisoning. Skin, number one, the most common route, how they get into our bodies. So here's the categories. Caution, warning, danger, peligro, poison up here, pretty bad. Toxins. There's another schematic of how the poisons, you know, this is going to be a white color, pink, and then dark red. Just a way to show you how toxic they are. Exposure routes. Okay, inhalation, oral, dermal, and ocular. Skin's are the one culprit here, how we expose to us. There's all different ways that goes into our body, but skin's the number one. So follow the rules for PPE. Next slide shows you the absorption rate, percentage-wise, based on human skin. And so if you have a chemical backpack leak on you or a nozzle go crazy and you get wet or somehow drenched, this is the percentage of absorption into your body. And I won't read them all to you, but you can kind of see here the percentage that goes into your body. Your hands, 6%, forearm, 8%. Your back, if you're wearing a backpack sprayer here, you know, 12 times the amount goes into your skin, scalp, so forth, armpit, forehead. Of course, the hot area, the groin area is 300%. So be careful. I've seen cases where it has happened. The biggest thing we see here for us on a daily basis is our forearms and our hand. If we get hot and sweaty, we wipe our brow with our forearms or forehead. So you can see how a little bit of residue may transfer. So be careful when spraying pesticides. Signs and symptoms of your poisoning as well. While applying, if you feel dizziness and tired, nauseous, feel like you're going to throw up, cramps, and so forth, definitely stop. If you have a delayed reaction of these signs and symptoms, even an hour after you apply the chemical, definitely notify your supervisor and kind of follow suit and see what happens further. But could be a case of pesticide poisoning. So be aware of what you're doing before and after you apply the chemicals and see how you feel. So what is the lethal dosage? We talked about the routes of entry into our bodies. What is a lethal dose? And where do you find that at? You'll find this on the SDS sheets. You will not find this on any pesticide label. This tells you how toxic the chemical is and the LD50. And the LD50 is a lethal oral dosage and measured in milligrams or kilograms based on body weight. And they tell you how toxic the chemical is. And this information is usually an estimate of toxicity for humans. So the lower the LD50 number, okay, the more toxic it is. The higher the number is the least toxic. Again, there won't be found on any labeling, SDS only. Okay, gives you an idea, a starting point, and when the whole issue of pesticides are toxic and carcinogenics and they're bad for me, I send a lot of customers to look at the LD50 and give them some education regarding what LD50 means and make them choose the choices. Okay. Everyday stuff, aspirin, LD50 of 1750, okay, milligrams a kilogram. Antifreeze, 3500, table salt, okay. And organic herbicide, 2800. Roundup, Promax, 1500, okay. Arizolan, Surflan, Dimension, pendimethalin, all your preems are under between 9 and 10,000, so very, very safe to use. Glyphosate, very, very safe to use, even compared to an organic herbicide. So you can see here how it kind of rates up there. Again, kind of a old slide I've had for years, but you can kind of see here that depending on the chemical, whether it be a group of insecticides, group of herbicides, the category of toxins that are out there, caution, warning, danger, won't take much to injure or kill a man. Depends how it's ingested, of course, but it's more a way of being precautious out there and being safe. 50-pound child could be poisoned by 1/3 of this amount. So again, it doesn't take very much. You got to toss in a joke here once in a while for our categories, but always think safety. Always think safety. Center words, PPE, SDS, LD50, those are the backbones for pesticide safety, whether they are an organic or synthetic. The question is to ask yourself, are they safe for me? Are they safe for the environment and so forth? The question is, go back to your center words. Danger may cause irreversible eye damage. Irreversible eye damage. Here's an example of Trimec 992. It's a 3-way herbicide, been around a long time. It's an amine formulation, which means it's very toxic, hazardous to my eyes. It burns my eyes. So danger, bad stuff. This is an organic, burnout 2. Contains citric acid, 24%. This is a danger chemical, okay? But it's organic. Everybody assumes that it's safe, but it's really not. This is actually more toxic than Trimec 992. Warning, moderate eye damage, skin irritation. This is another organic herbicide called Axe. It's a warning label. The ingredient is ammonium nonate, which is basically salt. So you can kind of see here that synthetics and organics, the definition is going to be the same regarding your toxicities and LD50s, as well as your center words. They mean the same. All the chemicals that are on your list, 99% of them, except for a few, are on this caution label. So avoid contact with eyes, skin, clothing. You may have some overlap, but soap and water be your best friend to rinse that off with if you come in contact with, but very safe to use. This is your Ranger Pro, Roundup Pro Max, kind of all the above here. You do have Quick Pro, which contains Zyquat, that's still a caution. Very safe product to use. This is another organic herbicide called Avenger, caution label, contact herbicide. But again, there's some organics out there that have a caution center word. So shop safely. Always read and follow the label. Center words will lead you into the right direction and be safe overall. That's the moral of that story. Choose the least toxic chemical that gives the desired level of control. That's what you shoot for. So as you open up a label, you're going to start seeing things here Hazard to humans and domestic animals. This is a statement that's on every pesticide label out there. Touching wires causes instant death, $200 fine. Be cautious again. Always read the label. Next, you're going to come across environmental hazards on the label. The biggest one we see in California now is surface waters, and don't spray around any standing water. Next one is also honeybees. Certain products are very toxic to honeybees. You'll start seeing more chemicals next year that will have a bee box, especially insecticides, a black box with letter B inside there. Next year, when we train you, we'll do more discussion regarding bee boxes, but be cautious around agricultural sites. If you guys are around those sites, groundwater and surface water is the next hazard that we see a lot this year. The environmental hazards always will indicate precautions to protect the environment. Again, you're always being watched, and accidents do happen. So groundwater, stormwater drains, and so forth, definitely be cautious. This is a kind of hard to see here, but it's a cross section of a label here. It talks about environmental hazards here, and here how it blows up. So this is called atrazine, for example. It's a pre-emergent, but doesn't do very well in sandy or loamy soil because it leaches down. So if you knew you had sandy soil, you wouldn't use this product, for example. So kind of be aware of your sites and make sure it matches up to the environmental statement on your labels. Physical and chemical hazards, those are mainly for storage, potential fire. Be cautious around any other hazards you may have in a warehouse. How you store your chemicals is a big factor. Usually, a fire department comes in and doing inspections and looks at storage facilities to make sure that they match up to the list there. And then a little further down, of course, the directions for use tells you the who, what, where, when, and whys regarding the product of actually how to mix it, where to use it, the use sites, kind of all the above here. Very important section to follow because the questions from an applicator inspector will be coming from here usually. Storage and disposal, pretty self-explanatory. The containers, I'll get more in depth here in a few minutes here, but look for guidelines regarding every chemical of how you get rid of the chemicals, how you store them, like in a dry, cool, ventilated area, and so forth, away from food stuff, etc. Handling, of course, transportation, storage, mixing, and loading and stuff, all the above. With this here, when it comes to mixing and loading, you may see a change in PPE. Be aware of that. That's the biggest change that I see now. So just take a glance over that and make sure that you're in compliant with this section. So the directions for use, mixing, re-entry, posting of the chemical, states what pests to be controlled, also the site, and what's to be protected. May have some sensitive sites as well. And when to apply the pesticide, timing. So here's an old label that I've had, but it's very similar layout to all pesticides. Over here on the left-hand side, it tells you how to place the bait stations, for example. You can use them indoors, outdoors, talks about the sites and so forth. Over here in the right-hand column is another label, talks about the use rates. This is an old one I did for rice up by Sacramento, but we talk about rice in California. So I'm doing rice for, say, barnyard grass. The rate is 40 pounds per acre. You'll see that on many different chemicals with use rates. Could be 2 ounces per 1,000, 3 ounces per 1,000, could be a pint per acre. Make sure the site to the pest and the volume matches up to what you're doing it for. Okay. This is an example of they talk about spray drift management. It will tell you when to spray it under wind direction, wind speed to minimize drift. They have some temperature ratings inside there, so definitely look at that to minimize exposure and drift. Wind speed. This is Trimec 992, a cross section of the label, and will tell you 10 miles per hour as well. So be aware of your wind speed. If you're an applicator, especially down there in Southern California, I would definitely have an anemometer with you on your truck to get a good idea to check wind speeds as an applicator before you start spraying. This is a great site that I like to have here. This is on the PPA Gordon does this. Excuse me. PPA Gordon does this. This is a product description. This is the active ingredients inside the jug: 2,4-D, MCPP, and dicamba. It tells you if you're an applicator and you spray this over some broadleaf weeds, it tells you what to expect. It tells you how the plant will begin to wilt and change. So one of the key things as far as an applicator, if you're mixing the right amount, make sure the chemical is working for you. So it's called the mode of action, and a great section of the label to look at. Spray preparation and tank mixes. If you are tank mixing, make sure your chemical is thoroughly compatible with other chemicals before you start. Constant agitation is required. So definitely follow the rules when it comes to tank mixes. And where to use. One of the biggest violations, number 2 in California, is guys not spraying the correct site. The correct site. So this chemical here is used for ornamental turf grasses, residentials, ornamental areas, institutions, right-of-ways, non-crop areas, fence lines, you name it. I can use this pretty much anywhere. What's happening is that guys will buy chemicals labeled for just turf only to kill clover, for example. And say that clover goes into a fence line. Well, legally, I can't spray that fence line with that product because it's not labeled for any non-crop areas. So if you spray turf grasses and cropland, non-cropland areas, and you have clover in both sites, make sure you buy the chemical that's labeled in those sites that you operate in. Keep it simple. How much to use? This is a cross section of the label. It tells you the use rates for the cool tooth and grasses, the species you're trying to control, use it on them, I'm sorry, and then the rates of application. It's in units are in pints per acre, as well as ounces per 1,000 square feet. Again, checks and balances. Make sure the application rates matches up to what your spray volume, your sprayer is calibrated for. Make sure you're accurate. And of course, further down the label, you'll see where you can use it. Maybe some disclaimers of as far as what you're spraying it on and safety. So definitely look at those for further details. Just more examples of precautions of not to do. 90-degree temperatures and so forth. So those are all safety factors. Storage and disposal, it will tell you don't store below 32 degrees, triple rinse a container. So again, the label pretty much tells you everything you need to do regarding that product. When it comes to storage, not a whole lot of changes over the years. Make sure you have a sign visible within 25 feet of where you store your chemicals. Make sure it's in English and Spanish both, posted clearly, and make sure your store is under lock and key. Lock and key, okay? Make sure the building is lockable, and warning signs can display no smoking, etc. That's kind of how it looks from a cartoon visual. Make sure to keep the wrong people from getting in for sure. Okay, storage areas. Unfortunately, that again, all pesticide areas don't look like this. These are pictures taken from years ago, but the concept, whether you have 2 chemicals on the shelf or 20 chemicals on the shelf, the biggest thing is face them like a store. Don't store dries over or under liquids by any means. In case of cross decontamination there, contamination. Always practice good storage. Make sure things are clean and neat. If you have any labels that have residue from pesticides, make sure you handle them with PPE when you walk into here. Okay, make sure things are good and clean and organized. Some look like this. You know, there's a lot of chemicals here. Some I have no idea what's in the jug. This is another safety hazard to the applicator. He has more surfland than I have in my warehouse, but things you want to definitely look at and practice good stewardship on this. Vehicles. If you have a vehicle or trailers that you guys store chemicals in, um, make sure that you have a toolbox or lockbox that's lockable, sealable, and make sure you have a 5x7, 3x5 card here that shows that you have chemicals inside that lockbox. If you have a trailer that's open, make sure you have a toolbox that's lockable, fastened down, and show the chemicals inside your trailers and so forth. So don't leave things unattended. If you go to the warehouse and buy chemicals from Ewing in point A to point B, don't stop off at the 7-Eleven and leave your chemicals unattended in the back there. And make sure they're labeled properly with these things. So location, lock and securement is a key factor on your vehicles. Some examples. Do not leave pesticides unattended. Unattended. Don't put them into the front seat of your truck. Things not to do. It's an accident. Chemical truck crash. The driver did survive, but these are all chemicals from Dow. This is Lowe's Band and other things. What a mess. But accidents do happen, and this is chemical. Anybody have a match? You have ammonium nitrate, propane, gasoline, you name it. This is definitely not good. Here's a pre-emergent over here. This is actually a true picture. So this is definitely one not to follow. Things look like this. That's the word you want to kind of follow suit on again. Storage is everything. From dries, fertilizers, the same way. Keep things neat and organized. Don't just toss them in a corner. If you have chemicals just kind of laying around, find a home for them. If you have a half a bag of merit, find a home for it. Put it out under some trees. Use it up. Don't go buy new until it's used up. There's a lot of open bags of fertilizer here. Just because it says, turf fertilizer of say a 22-510, you can use that on any tree if you want to. So find a home for it. Same with these grub controls or anything. Don't leave chemicals laying it down because they just go bad, and keep things nice and neat and organized. This is a major safety issue here. Storage and disposal. Best way to use the young portions. In California, years ago, we had a Monsanto and Dow had a 30-gallon drum replacement recycling. Now, if you have a 30-gallon drum, if you guys buy chemicals in 30s, if you use them up, make sure they are triple rinsed. You must call the county out to inspect those drums. They'll give you a stamp of approval for triple rinsing, and from there you can dispose of it. But this is extreme cases. This is actually up in Northern California, believe it or not. This was for a forester. So container disposal, you always wear your PPE. Your jug is empty. You want to fill that container about a quarter full of water. Close it tightly and shake it up pretty well. Take that material in that jug and dump that into your spray tank. That's called a rinsate. And then repeat again 2 or 3 times. The material you have in that spray tank, you can take that out to the approved site as per label and spray that out. This is a kind of a cartoon step-by-step of what to do here. You can see the triple rinsing effect here. All done 3 times. Take a knife or a pair of scissors and cut that container and throw the lid away, put that in the dumpster so it cannot be used for potable water or drinking water later on. It happens more than you think, okay? If you have a bad label, I can't read it. This code in California, CCR 6678, allows you to use service containers and also kind of same rule to mark your sprayers with. A, B, C here, you want to make sure push your name and address of the firm. So stay green and what county you may be in. Identify the container, say Roundup Pro Max, and then the center word. The number 7th violation in California is service containers for bad labeling. Okay, guys have jugs out there, they don't know what's into them. And also your sprayers aren't marked correctly. Every sprayer you guys have, a backpack, a 2 gallon sprayer, should have some labeling on it, what's in the tank. So stay green, Ranger Pro, for example, and the center word on the bottom. Uh, I tell my guys to go one step further. I always put the EPA registration number below it in case there's an accident. They know what to call. If he's unconscious, they know what's Ranger Pro, what's glyphosate, so they know where to call in case of an accident. That's just my idea. You can get some tip and pours, do the same thing. If your container's not very visible, use the same method. You can buy these in quarts or half gallons and gallon size containers. Just make sure they are marked correctly to the code. Here's an example when you would use those tip and pours. You can't read the label on the outside. It's torn. That's when you want to go back and buy that tip and pour, mark it, and have a label with you inside your truck and so forth. Here's an example why you want to transfer the chemical over to a right container. It's follow the label. Why can't? Because it's hard to do when there isn't one and I can't read it. These are all pesticides over here in the bottom right hand corner here, and no one's taking care of them. So this is a accident waiting to happen. There's a milk jug, Sobe, Gatorade bottles, and we see out there that pesticides removed from the original containers are the highest cause of pesticide poisoning out there. Yeah. Your neighbors, can I borrow some Roundup? Sure. Here's a beer bottle. Here's a Gatorade bottle. And they pour it in there, and they go out and use the bottle for other usage besides drinking the Sobe. Okay. Old slide. This is a Jim Beam and then oatmeal. In this jug here, they had DDT, and over here was parathion. These are old chemical slides I got from a buddy of mine years ago, but it happens more than you think it does. Okay, question for you. What is in this jug here? These two jugs, what's in it? Anybody have a guess? We have no idea. If the person who knew what was in them transfer them to a container, label them correctly, and so forth. So these are considered to be hazmat throwaways currently. So the effects of careless handling, to me, that is careless handling. Um, direct health risk, sure. Environmental pollution, yes. In other effects of the environment, if that was sprayed out and didn't know what it was, yes. And you can see here how things work out there. Because these are the unknowns. Again, these are all symptoms associated with pesticide poisoning, headache, nauseous, chest pains, and any point in time, it can definitely happen. So be careful. And from there, you have first aid. So if you feel those symptoms and follow the first aid assignments you see in your label and how to get ready for emergency. Basic first aid. If someone happens to have an accident, they swallow it, a backpack leaks on your hands, you have chemical on your shoulders, or where it may be, follow the label. Okay, follow the SDS sheet. Sometimes a label or an SDS sheet may have a note to a doctor, provides information medically, so follow that as well. Seek medical attention. Okay, there should be take the label with you at all times. Keep extra copies of the label and SDS sheet in your vehicle and offices for emergencies. Okay. Communication. This should be posted where you guys mix and load. It should be posted in the back of your truck windows if you carry pesticides on your truck. What to do in case of emergency. Along with company policy at Stay Green, make sure you follow this policy as well as far as the N series for pesticide usage. So know where to go on the facility. Take your SDS and label it with you and tell them what happened for sure. Here's the things to another form you can kind of copy and print out, kind of create your own and have someone help you, how to happen, the logistics and so forth. So tell your doctor. That's our worst case scenario. This is a printout, a cross section of a label. Over here are the 4 routes of entry on the left-hand side here. It tells you what to do just in case. You see here, the common denominator here is drench with water for 15 to 20 minutes. So when you're out spraying, do your best to have a water source, able to find a water source, either through a hose bib, a 5-gallon container on the truck itself, and have a water source. Every label will have a number to call just in case of emergencies from the label. So make sure you have that written down or have access to that as well. On skin, that was the number 1 issue, we know that. So the biggest thing is, finding a water source, drench with water, okay? Any clothing that becomes contaminated, remove that clothing. Wash body with mild soap and water. If you don't have soap, water just fine. If you begin to have acute toxicity, redness or burning, apply clean, dry clothes, okay? Dry covering, paper towel, coveralls, anything. And never apply any ointments like silver, Bactine of any type until after seeing a doctor. Eyes. Wash quickly, okay? Wash water from the bridge of your nose out. Flush for 15 minutes, the best you can, or as much water as you have possibly, and then seek medical attention. No chemicals or other saline solutions that are designed for eyes unless they are approved for pesticide usage, okay? Mainly just water, cool rinse. This is an eye wash, of course. If you have one of those handy, you're mixing linicides, fantastic. Make sure their usage and operating. This one is not. This is an example of ones not to use. Please do not use this one at all. These are approved for eye washes, okay? These are ones that can be kept on your vehicles and trucks. If you spray a lot in the field or have guys who all they do is spray for the day, this is pretty cheap insurance. Like to have these in one of your trucks mounted. Make sure you're trained on them and how to use them, and they are approved for pesticides. Find your water source, okay? That's the moral of the story there for your skin and your eyes. Find a good water source, okay? When you spray pesticides, this is a spray plot we did years ago up in the Northwest, but it shows you where the chemical lands. And we spray with a handgun. We use backpack sprayers or a bigger handgun with a big tank in the truck. Where's the chemical going to land? So you see here, he has a Tyvek suit on. We put on some indicator cards, leather gloves, just water and blue dye. That was a test plot to see where things are going, okay? So if you're using those spray guns and a pump sprayer with a handgun, you can see here how the exposure is being listed, okay, to the application method. From the knees down, we're getting exposed. Our hands are exposed all the time. Our back and atom area is exposed because of the backpack sprayer. So when you spray with those equipment, you're going to have some exposure. It's always possible. Yeah, these are the effects again: acute, chronic, and allergic. Kind of a refresh your memory regarding that. So remember that all the effects are acute. Okay. Chronic poisoning. Again, we can't really be sure what lead to cancer. We don't know that. Okay. Acute poisoning can cause headaches, blurred vision, nauseous, 2 hours up to 12 hours. So kind of refresh your memory on that as well. Look at our routes of entry again. Common courtesy, but common sense plays a big effect. Wash your hands. This whole thing during COVID-19, we're hearing the same thing over and over again. Wash your hands and wear PPE. Same thing with this pesticide application. Before eating, drinking, smoking, going to the restroom, bathroom breaks, constantly wash your hands, okay? Routes of entry again, oral, wash your hands before eating, drinking, smoking, all the above. I'll repeat here as well. And of course, my hero, he has a drink in his hand, eating chips and smoking. He's halfway home. But wash your hands for sure, okay? Number 2 violation in the state of California is PPE, PPE. Okay. Inspector rolls up on you. He's going to see what you're wearing. If you're not wearing gloves when spraying chemicals, he's going to bust you. If he's not, ask you questions, and he'll write you up as well. So he will ask for the label to make sure that the PPE matches up to what you're wearing. If not, it'd be a violation. So that's the new code for California. Number 2 violation in the state currently. So always wear PPE. What is REI, re-entry label, in regards to PPE? Gives the amount of time which must pass before people can re-enter a treated area without wearing PPE. All the chemicals on your list, okay, will be the landscape maintenance side or the specialty side. Those chemicals usually dry within 10 to 20 minutes. It varies. Okay. For us, the chemical reentry is when chemical has dried. The chemical has dried. Again, how long is that? It can vary, but 10 to 15 minutes on an average. If you must go back into that site and it's still wet, always wear your PPE. Okay. If you're using a dry application, fertilizers with a weed and feed type, a fertilizer with dimension, for example, wait until the dry dust and have settled before you go back into that site. Okay. Gloves. The new code for gloves: don't wear leather of any kind, no cloth gloves. Make sure they are nitrile approved. Coveralls are still out there. The labels don't require them except for humotoxin. Danger poison may require them. Definitely look at the label for that. But you can still wear these for additional protective. For long sleeve, these are 100% approved. Okay. Section for California Code 6738. All gloves must be in a 14 mil thickness for gloves. And that's pretty much standard. There is a deviation where you can wear a lesser mil glove for 15 minutes when working on your pumps, spray tips, anything that's not used for application. You can definitely wear a glove into a 5 mil or a 7 mil glove for 15 minutes and then discard that. Those gloves must be thrown away. And then when you go back to mixing and loading, go back to your 14 mil. That is per code now. The biggest change that I see in labeling for PPE is the apron. PBI Gordon products, Q4s, Speed Zone Red, Speed Zone Southern. Start looking at the new labels. Other manufacturers will be on there as well. So you'll have a section there for mixing and loading or applying. Make sure you don't see apron on there. If you do see apron, go down and have them. Have a couple extra ones for your guys in the loading stations, but they may require a face shield as well. So stay tuned for that. Eyewear, this code 6738.2. The ANSI number must be on the glasses with Z87.1 plus or 2010. This is the standard code for California and pretty much ocean nationwide, but California for sure. Make sure is on the glasses. You'll find that on the arm of the glasses, left side or right side on the inside printed. So make sure those numbers are present before spraying. This is an example of dimension 270G label. It shows that PPE is long sleeve shirts, long gloves and pants, socks and shoes, but doesn't show any eyewear. Eyewear still must be worn when applying this chemical in California, even though it does not say that on the label. For the new code, as far as PPE, who's in the employer shall, the employer's responsible for maintaining PPE, okay? Make sure it's clean, the gloves, the Tyvek, the eyewear, okay? Now you're gonna find out if you wear your long sleeve shirts and you spray and you take them home to wash them, it's going to be a procedure of how you do that. Wash your gloves, make sure they're clean. Wash safety glasses. Keep separate from all the clothes. Use a pre-soak use highest water level, full cycle, hot water, strong soap, and so forth. So this is all kind of how a procedure to use if you take your clothes home outside a linen service. Just don't put too many soap in there. Okay. Common sense plays a role here. Keep them separate from any other clothes in the household. Emergency responses. Again, if you have a call, this is another number you can call. Poison Control Center. This is for 800 number for California and nationwide. Besides the number that's on the chemical label, you can call this number as well. Make sure you have the STS label with you because they will ask you for the EPA number. Misuse statement. Reminder violation to use a product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. If the label says 5 ounces, you can't go 8 as a maximum. So you get the only deviation you have in California is you can lower the rates, but you can't go add to the rates. Okay. In the event of any pesticide spill, remember the 3 C's. What they are: control the spill, you want to contain the spill, and you want to clean up the spill. Okay. Make sure you follow company policy in-house to what to do in case of a spill, either on site or what you do out in the field. Things you should keep on your truck even. First and foremost, protect yourself first. Okay. Wear PPE, have on your truck, of course. Animals, water sources, etc. Control it, stop the spill from continuing. If you're around a dirt area, you don't have any floor sweep, use plain old dirt if you have to. Contain it. Do your best to stop it from spreading anyplace else. Okay. And of course, clean up. Do not hose down the spill to make the situation much, much worse. Use sawdust. Go down to Napa, buy some, floor sweep, cat litter, anything you can to get this thing cleaned up. I'm a big fan of the floor sweep. Does very well. There's spill kits out there that contain pillows. They work, but when you get rid of the pillow, they have to go into a sealed drum container. That is now a hazmat. So now you have to wait for a hazmat day to dispose of within your county and keep track of it, have it stored separately in your warehouse. A little more red tape regarding that. They definitely do work though. This does wonders. Have some floor sweep here. It works very well. Run down to Napa, grab a few bags, have some few bags in your truck just to stop the chemical. Thing with this here, if I spill Roundup right here, I can use this, soak up the Roundup, and put that in a broadcast spreader and put that into a non-crop labeled site as per my product and broadcast it out. Okay. This is just water here, for example, trial here, but I would not put I'll put some floor soup on here, stop from spreading, and get this cleaned up. There's your pillows. They do work, but this is now just water, but this is 100% soap. So you're going to handle this with PPE, put that into a drum. You can't throw it away. Or hazmat, floor sweep, broadcast it out, put that into a drum, take it out to a site, broadcast it on the approved site, and you're good to go. A lot simpler. But build your own spray kit, your spill kit at your shop. Keep things simple out there. And have a tarp, of course, for decontamination. There's your eye wash, first aid kit. Build your own spill kit in your shop or your trucks to keep your end user safety. Dust broom, and so forth. On your trucks, first aid kit, eye wash, kind of all the above. The biggest thing is that how to reduce exposure in the field. So make sure you replace leaky hoses, valves, connections on all your equipment to make sure it's working properly. On a rainy day, fill them with water. Do it inside the shop. Do your best to calibrate at least once a year, twice a year. If you have a brand new applicator, make sure that applicator is calibrated to the equipment. Make sure equipment is very clean. Okay. As you clean your equipment, always wear PPE. Of course, always read and follow the label. Handle mixed outside and so forth. You guys create your own list here if you want, but find ways to, within your company, to reduce exposure of pesticides. Use other methods that you can come up with. Of course, don't eat, smoke, all the above. Watch your clothing, cover your entire body, wear PPE if you have to, as per law. 14 mil gloves, eye protection, and so forth. So these are all ways by following the rules, following the N series, following the law, minimize drift. Make sure you know the operating pressure of your spray tips. If you have a backpack, don't go over 40 pounds of pressure. And make sure you match up the pressure to your nozzling and so forth. So that's how we get by reducing exposure to the end user. Anybody see any violations here? Any violations at all? Well, he has long sleeve shirts on, but they're all rolled up. This is in California. No eyewear. He's spraying, So his backpack is labeled, but eyewear, gloves, two biggest factors. So if the inspector sees this, if he was a nice inspector, it could be just a warning. If it was his second offense, could be up to, $3-4 fine. So it doesn't take much. As we kind of close up shop here, guys, the biggest thing is that we can't ignore safety procedures, whether it be spraying pesticides or anything. We start looking at, failure to observe the pesticide laws and regulations within this state can endanger you and your environment. Two biggest things this year, I think, is the environmental safety as well as end user safety. If you become casual about safety, can lead to casualty, doing things. Again, if you apply fumitoxin and you apply it wrong, that can be very, very costly to you and others around you. Any pesticide has its precautions, but some are worse than others. But don't do things halfway. And always must follow good stewardship. Do the right thing when spraying pesticides. Like I said earlier, we're always being watched when we spray pesticides. All it takes is one error to happen in any county you spray, someone to look out there in a public figure, and you're going to have some issues with the public. So follow the rules. The label is a law. The label protects you, and you'll be safe overall. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you on this training. We covered a lot of information, a lot of slides. The biggest thing is that these pesticides are here to stay. They're not going away, but they're a good tool, and treat them like a good tool out there in your job sites, and you'll be successful in your spray application. Again, thank you for having me talk to you from Fernald Education Services. With that, I leave you. Thank you.